Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our now 6th iSportConnect eMasterclass. Today, we're very happy to be being joined by a great panel with us today, and Kim Cook from Hookit, who will be moderating today's session. Thank you for joining us. We are iSportConnect, in case you didn't know us. We are the world's largest online private sports business community with over 24,000 online members. We host numerous global events all around the world, and we also have our consultancy business, which you may know. Now, today I will leave you in Kim's very capable hands, and she will take you through today's session, which is all focusing on sports marketing in a post-pandemic environment. We will have a 5-minute brief introduction. We'll then go into a 20 to 25-minute discussion, and then we will have a final 15-minute audience Q&A to finish. So thank you for everyone for joining us. I will now let Kim take the reins and see you at the end.
Thanks, Ben, and welcome everybody, and thanks for joining. Everyone's probably been on a ton of webinars and video calls, but we're going to try to make this as engaging and as exciting as possible today. So, as Ben mentioned, my name's Kim Cook. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Hookit. We're an AI-powered sponsorship valuation platform, and we have some very esteemed colleagues here on the panel with me. We have Ricardo Fort, who's the head of global sponsorships for Coca-Cola. We have Ilko Vandernol, who's the head of global partnerships for AB InBev. We have James Hagen, who's the CEO of Husky Chocolate, and enjoying some of it as we speak, right? You had your cup?
Delicious.
Yes, there you go. And Patrick Lowe, who's the head of sales in North America for La Liga. So thank you guys all for joining. Really appreciate the time and looking forward to the talk today. So just real quickly, we wanted to share a few high-level stats. As I mentioned, the whole of sport and sponsorship. So we've seen some really interesting trends that I wanted to share with all of you, just in the state of what's happened since kind of the middle of March, when a lot of sport went dark. Before we jump in this panel, iSportConnect asked me to share some stats that we're seeing at Hookit to share with you kind of the state of the industry. So in mid-March, as I mentioned, most sports came to a halt. So we looked at kind of the period 2 weeks prior and 2 weeks after, just to see how the world has been reacting. So what we've seen is from social media, the sports and organizations and athletes are posting a lot less, about 48% down in activity. But the fans are more engaged with the content that's being put out there. So the engagement on the stuff that's being posted has actually increased about 15%. But because of the volume that's dropped, the value for sponsors has gone down significantly. But the value of the stuff that is actually being posted is up about 21%. So, and athletes were really the main drivers behind that, just because the teams and leagues are posting a little bit less, and people want to see how athletes are thinking through this crisis and dealing with it. So with that said, I wanted to share a few kind of high-level themes that we see that are really resonating. So, some of those themes you can kind of see here, right? Behind the scene content is really popular. So, how folks are dealing with this, what they're doing at home, having a partner promote your brand kind of in their everyday life seems to be much more engaging than, just something that's kind of pre-canned and released. So you'll notice here, Ronaldo is working out while he's sharing Nike's message of, playing for the world and staying inside. And then we've seen a lot of other like high performing types of content where you see partners participating in like trending challenges like the stay at home challenge, or some of you may have seen Federer hitting the ball against the wall and kind of challenging other folks on that. So all those type of themes have been really strong, along with efforts of folks playing esport and getting in playing video games. La Liga did kind of a cool tournament, and Patrick, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about this one and what you guys did, but the content was super engaging.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we've put on probably 3 main initiatives, one being the La Liga Santander Fest, which was a concert we streamed. And then the photo you have there is Morata scoring with Morata. And I think he's doing the same celebration. It was great. I mean, we partnered with Uninterrupted for that esports tournament last weekend. And we had NFL, NBA, NWSL, La Liga athletes all playing together. I mean, across the 3 initiatives, we've seen, I think, €1.5 million almost for charity, $1.5 million masks. And it's been great. I mean, I think it, you mentioned it, Kim, when it comes to player generated content, integrating with the clubs, brand partners and broadcasting partners. It's a great way to stay active, but also on top of everything, it's, for a great cause.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, I wanted to just give everybody here on the panel just a second to share a little bit about their role, then we'll jump in on some questions. So, Ricardo, you've got a big remit and kind of dealing with all global sports. So, if you wanted to share a little bit about your role.
Thanks, Kim, and hello, everyone. Good to be part of the panel here. I work for the Coca-Cola Company, as the name says, and I manage the global sports and entertainment partnerships. We have a good team here based in Atlanta in the United States, and we have a few other people in future host countries for the FIFA World Cup and for the Olympics. So China, Japan, Qatar, and all these places where we are going to be seeing events coming from in the coming years.
Terrific. And Ilko, you want to share a little bit about your role?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm heading up global partnerships at AB InBev, the home of brands like Budweiser, Stella Artois, Michelob Ultra, and Corona, and 500 other brands, mostly local brands around the world. My role is twofold. One is to oversee and manage true global properties, World Cup, FIFA, Premier League, La Liga, World Surfing League, and a few others. And 2, work with our 6 or 7 zones around the world to set their sponsorship strategies for their respective markets.
Terrific. Thank you for joining. James, you have one of the best titles on this panel, the Chief Chocolate Drinker. Welcome. You want to talk a little bit about your role?
Somebody's got to do it. It's great to be here, especially in the kind of times that we are, and share with all of you guys. So I am the CEO of Husky Chocolate UK. And I have been for around 6 months, and I'm working really closely with our founders, Linus and Robin, to push the Husky Chocolate strategy as we move across Europe, and we have a heavy presence in the Nordics, and also looking towards the States. So a lot of my time is spent drinking chocolate, going on various escapades with the Husky Chocolate team, and getting this really exciting brand out there amongst customers.
Terrific. Thanks again for joining. Patrick, who's with us, who heads sales in North America for La Liga. Patrick, why don't you talk a little bit about what your role is?
I do not get paid to drink chocolate. I wish I did. With La Liga and focusing on sales in North America. So when we say sales, it's mostly through sponsorship and partnership. So I was with the team in Madrid for well over a year, kind of the global headquarters, and then switched to New York probably almost a year ago now, and working on very much kind of regionalized partnerships, focusing on our joint venture with Relevant Sports, and working throughout Canada, USA, and Mexico.
That's great. Well, thanks again for everybody joining. Well, let's jump into it. So, Ricardo, we'll start out with you. Kind of an obvious question to begin here is, what's the biggest difference in your approach to sports marketing and sponsorships now? How are you thinking through it at Coca-Cola?
Well, of course, with all the events being postponed or canceled, the implementation of the programs that we've been working on has changed completely. One thing that didn't change or that hasn't changed has been the importance of content for us. So a lot of the work that we do with the partners is to source content that is relevant to tell our brand stories. And we continue to do this. We continue to work with them. We continue to tell interesting stories through sponsorships and through sports and entertainment. So that hasn't changed. The live events, because of the nature of everything that is happening now, is on hold. But to be totally honest, the live event is a very small part of the number of people that have access to the things that we do. So while everything is on hold and people don't have access to live events, as long as we are capable to continue to tell this story through content and through the partnerships, the FIFA and the Special Olympics and the Olympics and so on and so forth, we're still very active. And of course, there's also a lot of replanning because of all the postponements of the event as well.
Yeah. So because of all of that, like, what would you say your top priority is now? And as you sit there in this day and age, not knowing what's going to be the future. So how are you guys looking at that?
Well, so there are two ways to talk about it. The first one, I think, from a corporate standpoint, when you think about priorities for the company, it's employee safety and business continuity, and that somehow impacts the work that we do in sponsorships, because we have teams on the ground that are working or were working to implement the events. Our first concern is making sure that everybody is taken care of. The events, the sponsorships, everything else can wait. But when it comes to specific events that have been postponed, so I'll give you the example of the Olympics. The main priority today is working with the IOC and with the organizing committee for the games in Japan to figure out how we can help them make the changes that are necessary. We are sponsors of the torch relay in Japan. The Olympics were postponed the day before the kickoff of the relay. So we have to work with TOCOG, the organizing committee in Japan, to figure out how you move all this effort to next year. And this is work that is happening right now in Japan and depending on the programs in different countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot to navigate. So thanks for sharing that. And Ilko, InBev has publicly pivoted sports marketing funds to Red Cross and other relief efforts. How much has your sponsorship strategy been altered by this pandemic and the sudden lack of sport?
Yeah, let me first, I guess, highlight what has not changed, and it's sort of important. I know, everybody wants to talk about change, and I think a lot of changes are more than anything else accelerated because of this pandemic. Things that probably would have happened anyway. But I want to spend 10 seconds on what is not changing, right? If you look at our company's mission, bring people together in a better world, that's a very challenging message in today's environment.
Yeah.
What is not going to change? It's not going to change. How we do it, when we do it, and where we do it may change. If I go a step down and say, okay, in my world of partnerships, particular passion points, the passion points we don't think are going to dramatically change. Sports, passion point number one, music, passion point number two, or probably share the number one spot. And there are some other passion points that are maybe coming up a little bit, like home cooking. That's an obvious one. But sport is a passion point is not going to go away. How are you going to activate that may change. And lastly, what is not going to change, if you look at so if you can bring people together in a better world as a mission, it's not going to change, but how you do it is something else. The passion points are not changing. And in the world of experiential, our vision is that we turn experiential marketing partnerships into content and content into experiences. And why is it important? Turning content is just scaling your properties and scaling your partnerships. So it's not going to change. How and when you're going to do it is going to change. So what does it mean concretely for us? We continue to work very closely, obviously, with our main partners around the world. La Liga on this call here, Premier League, and on a local level, NBA, MLB. And even though the season have not started for many of those properties or disrupted, there's still a lot of content to be generated. What for us is key is that now we find a consumption moment. If fans are going to the ballpark or a football stadium, they consume. That disappeared. Or they go to a bar and watch a Premier League match, that disappeared. So how do we replace that with in-home consumption? And that's where the world of e-commerce is coming in.
Yeah, so have you, kind of pivoted the way you're putting your message out there to respond to that change? I mean, people are going to consume, but just in a different way. How are you guys thinking through that?
Yeah, I mean, as Ricardo said earlier, for us, the main reason to get into partnerships in sports is not, it's important, but the main reason is not the live audiences in the stadiums or the events that we're involved in. That's a lot of people, but it's really the skill that we achieve through content and, on trade, off trade, and in their home, where it makes a difference. So it basically only accelerates what we're doing, which means, people that consume at home We'd like them to consume our products responsibly, and therefore, particularly e-commerce is getting more and more important.
Yeah, oh, that makes perfect sense. Well, we'll shift a little from what some of the larger brands are thinking here to La Liga and how you guys are kind of pivoting. Patrick, from a league standpoint, how have you been working with your partners during this time and kind of keeping them engaged?
Sure. I think there's kind of two pieces to it. The first, I think it's important, or I guess we're in a fortunate position that many of our partnerships are long-term partnerships. I think how we look at partners yesterday, today, tomorrow, and for the next year or 2 years, or however long those partnerships are, it gives us maybe, I wouldn't say it's easier, but it helps us navigate difficult situations with partners. I think the second piece, and it goes back to what Ricardo and Elko both mentioned, and I guess it's a buzzword of the time, and it just is content. What type of content are we producing and creating with partners? There's a content strategy within each of our partnerships before the pandemic, and there will be during and after. I think the key for us right now with partners has been to, I guess, create that custom content or custom experiences that we're certain will kind of organically resonate with fans and audience, and that they still kind of remain true to the message that partners want, and then I guess amplify that. So, I guess we're still all systems go when it comes to content. We kind of have that from the title, global and regional levels. In North America, for the last kind of year and a half, we've been going, I guess we had a content-centric strategy. Before the pandemic, we were doing 12 shows for the US, 6 in Spanish, 6 in English weekly. So if there's genuine ways to integrate partners into those shows, that's great. Or if it's, finding influencers and talent that really kind of create these custom experiences and segments for partners that will really resonate, as I said, organically with fans. That's kind of how we've been approaching it. So we have to be flexible. We have to be able to adapt to the times and kind of, not hit the panic button, but look at it with our partners on a kind of holistic view of what we all want to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, long-term partnerships and collaborations really are, this is going to be a look back, a blip in time, right? But it's terrific that you're able to continue to collaborate. And James, from your side, what's important to Husky right now? Like, how is this changing and pivoted what you guys are doing and how you're thinking through your sponsorships?
So I suppose we're lucky in a bit of a way because we're a lot smaller than companies who are on the panel here. I think from our side, what we tend to do and what we have tend to have done in the last year in terms of marketing is very much think about our followers and our consumers and the experience they have. They have a fantastic connection with Formula One and IndyCar and offshore powerboat racing with us when the seasons are running and when we're doing really exciting things. But I think what we've tried to do is we've tried to carry through that experience, but do it in a slightly different way whilst we're in this kind of situation. And we've done this through a few different ways, as you guys have as well. We've participated very closely with partners like Alfa Romeo and like McLaren. We kind of almost have a partnership, a true partnership. I know that Mark Waller at McLaren has been bringing a lot of changes in terms of how they connect with their followers, and we're doing the same thing. So we have done things like Easter egg hunts. We've gone for hikes in the mountains. Some of our team in Scandinavia have been up there, and they've been quite engaging with content. In the UK, we've started to do things like competitions and behind the scenes kind of things. So I think we've just changed the experience. We've made it more digital. And I think like a lot of the trends are saying, we've tried to go a lot more behind the scenes so people get to know individuals as opposed to just us as a brand. And we've tried to use that time to do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think being authentic is really, you can see it very clearly on social media because you get rewarded by people looking at your content right away. And, at Hookit, that's what we, really do, is look at that with the partnerships and help people kind of monitor and optimize that stuff. So it's a really nice transition into the next question I was going to kind of throw out there to the crowd, which is, social media now has kind of captured center stage during the actually live game events in sports. So how do you guys think going forward that, this is going to impact your strategy, and have you realized kind of leaning into this more has gotten you, similar or different results than you had hoped? So just wanted to throw that out there because it's obviously kind of leapfrogged maybe some of your other efforts just because of the current pandemic, and, just to see how you guys are thinking about it.
Maybe I'll try to take this one. I think
Okay.
what Elko mentioned is quite true. One of the effects of this crisis is the acceleration of some of the things that we've been doing. So companies have been forced to be more active in areas that not everyone was paying enough attention. So the work with athletes, for example, which is something that La Liga has been doing, the work with influentials, which companies like AB InBev has been doing, or with the partners from McLaren like Husky. So all of that, all of us were doing that before, but now because of the lack of options that we have in our toolbox, we've been doing this more. And I think that the infrastructure and the capabilities that the companies are building today because of being forced to do it are going to have a long-term effect on how we do marketing after this is all over. And that's one of the positive, we have always to be optimistic. One of the positive outcomes from a marketing organization of a process like that is being limited in the tools that you have at your disposal. So I think there's going to be a lot of more interesting things coming in the next years because of the pressures that we are facing today.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. Is anyone else thinking about this a little bit differently or have anything to add? We
just jumping in there from a Husky perspective, we've seen some really positive interaction with e-gaming. I know some of you guys on the panel would have seen this too, because we're very much a brand that appeals to young children right up to the oldest kind of adults. We've seen a really good response when we've had Husky within an e-gaming format because it's not let's say a gambling company or anything to do with tobacco and stuff like that. It's been quite a decent brand to put on areas of the esports for the younger generation. And obviously we've been really lucky with assets like Lando, who's been an e-gamer for many years and has been racing in partnerships. So I think it's something we're definitely going to do a lot more of, especially because we are starting to invest in grassroots racing as well with the younger generation. And I think even we have a young kind of digital marketing team, and I'm in my early 30s, and half the stuff I haven't noticed that they're doing it all the time, like takeovers and stuff like that. So I think esports is a really great direction for us to move into.
Yeah. How about at InBev, Vilko? You guys, how are you thinking through this kind of surge in social media now because of the options that you have?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but social media is part and parcel, I think, of every company's strategy, and there's no difference here. That's where we achieve scale. You have to distinguish yourself from other brands, and that's where our partnerships and our sports partnerships particularly come in, where we can offer meaningful content. We have been doing it all along, and to use the word again, I think it's only accelerating now how we're doing that. Forced by the COVID-19 pandemic, I think our strategy has slightly changed simply because it's more a different tone rather than a real different strategy, right? So we applied more a tone of resilience and resolve, and we're going to you will already see some change right now that the tone of voice of resilience and resolve is moving to more recovering and optimism carefully, right? So we cannot be over optimistic here. But yeah, social media and also esports real quickly, because it came up several times, or gaming rather, a little broader. We have made a lot of inroads. I think we're still trying to figure out exactly, what it means for our portfolio. We had a relationship with Overwatch League last year. We have a lot of stuff going on with Call of Duty and League of Legends around the world. works well for us. And again, it will only accelerate, I think, going forward.
Yeah, and just to kind of expand a little on that, like as you kind of accelerating into this, I don't know if you guys saw, but iSportConnect actually came out with a survey this week, and they're saying about 81% of people within sport say that the evidence and data to support the effectiveness and monitor their sports sponsorships is going to be, excuse me, more important than ever going forward. So I'm wondering if you guys kind of agree with that feeling in the crowd and why. Ilko, I don't know if you want to keep rolling or if you'd like somebody else to jump in, but be interested to see how you guys are using data and thinking through that as you're monitoring this effectiveness of what you guys are doing.
So you broke up a little. You're asking about the importance of sports, right?
And proving the value of the sponsorship in sport by data. Yeah, like monitoring it, measuring it, and how you guys are thinking through that, because the poll this week was saying like 81% of people think it's super important to be able to kind of measure and monitor it. So I was kind of curious if where you guys sit with that and how you think through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we pay a very, very substantial amount on rights fees every year to sport leagues, teams, professional teams, and what have you. So, and our company is all about measurement and data. So there's an ongoing effort, and that could be, there's not like one metric that we have, but it starts with social listening to see what is relevant. We translate that into programs, and those programs are basically measured on engagement and reach, impressions, and that in turn is being translated in an ROI, typically in a media equivalent, or to the MMM model in an actual ROI. So that remains very critical. COVID-19 is not going to change that. If anything, it may be more front and center, because actually, it's what they say, right? A politician will never waste a good crisis, and even though a bit of a weird comparison, but in a way, that's what we're doing at AB InBev. We're using the crisis to basically reset. We're never complacent. But this just motivates us and incents us to look at things differently, accelerate things, have a different view, and not move forward as usual. And that's what we're discussing with our partners, including La Liga as well. How can we, take this to our advantage? And I think we're improving our content efforts. I think we're improving our social media efforts, and we're improving our measurement and data collection efforts. We have to.
Yeah, definitely. And Ricardo, I know you've written some interesting articles about not using, gut feel to navigate your sponsorship decisions. And can you share a little bit about how you're thinking about data and using it going forward with your sponsorships and what's most important to you?
Yeah, sure. So for all these 808 people connected now, the number one thing that my bosses and the management of most companies want to talk to us is how the investments are impacting the results of the business. Yes, it's great, it's fun, but at the end of the day, if you're not driving growth for the company, there is no purpose of doing this. So we have invested in a lot of development of models that allow us to look at the investments that we make every year. And because of the large base that we have in countries and events, we have the benefit of accuracy for that. But we are capable today to say how much the Olympic Games or the FIFA World Cup or each of the events that we invest are expected to drive from a volume, number of bottles sold, and also from a revenue standpoint. And that gives a lot of confidence for management to make decisions on investments. And this is one of the areas that a lot of companies don't pay a lot of attention, because the event execution is so time consuming and so visible that most people are not talking a lot about that. But at the end of the day, if you're an executive in sports, as most of us are or want to be, this is what you should be paying attention. And I'm sorry, this is going to make some noise now. It's a merchandise moment. So cheers. That's a contractual obligation. I'm sorry for that.
It was very subtle. I like it. Well, I think it's I love the phrase, you can't manage what you can't measure. So I think, it seems to be echoing. And, Patrick, from your side, that obviously puts more pressure on you as a league to share with these folks on, how you guys are doing with the partnership. So how are you guys thinking through that at La Liga?
I think it's kind of, I guess, in 3 points. The third is probably more on a personal, professional level on terms of my day-to-day. But, I think we're being forced to be innovative. And again, not to use buzzwords like content innovation, but it's true. I mean, thinking outside the box and making sure that we are driving that value for partners. And, that second piece is, can we validate it with our partners? Can we give them the results that they're looking for? How are we measuring it? What types of third parties we're using to measure those internal tools to help validate those partnerships. And then the third, where I said with mine, with kind of my day-to-day is, I think it's difficult, and I'd say that we've paused, cold outreach. I'm not going to email Ricardo tomorrow and say, hello, my name is Patrick. Do you have marketing dollars? I mean, that's just not necessarily part of what we don't want to come across as tone deaf to the situation, and it's just not the right time. So for us, I think how we're going to evolve through valuation kind of in the coming months is, having those conversations with a purpose. Maybe it is bringing data and those points that are validated to partners or potential partners to say, this could work for us, for everyone involved. I mean, I think business has to go on. And I think for us, it's looking through the lens of how are we doing that? We're always wanting to do it in a meaningful way, but I think data is really going to kind of help ignite those conversations for us in the future. And it helps validate the current partnerships.
Yeah, definitely. And James, I know, we talked a little bit about some of the pivots because of your heavy investment in motorsport, right? And how are you guys thinking through the return on what you've invested now in your sponsorships with this pivot? Like, obviously, you've gotten some great esport exposure or some of this, but is that kind of worth as much to you as the live racing? Like, how do you guys think through that?
I think we've definitely done a lot of motorsports over the last 2 years, and you will have seen from about 2 years ago, we had a big increase in terms of our sponsorship and what we're getting involved with. I think to the point now we're really comfortable with who we're working with. We work with IndyCar, McLaren, Alpha, and also powerboats offshore. But actually, at the moment, we're also expanding very much in the snow sports and extreme sports area too. So we're trying to bring that in line with the motorsports piece, because Husky, it has always been a brand that's been more about adventure and exploration and those kind of things. And I think they balance off quite nicely, because you have the whole big F1 world and the kind of all the marketing and all the data and opportunities surrounding that. But then you have more of an influencer-led kind of almost individual sports within the kind of snow arena. And we're tying those two together at the moment. In terms of return on investment, we tend to go into things that we all passionately believe in and that we enjoy personally as sports. All of our founders and all of our backers, we're avid fans. We supported Millwall because we think it's a fantastic club, and of course they're going to get into the Premier League soon, which we're really looking forward to. And also in terms of motor racing, some of the guys that are involved with us in terms of an executive level, some of these guys used to race themselves, so it's almost for them, it's like it's almost coming back full circle to when they were racing. So we get the data from the F1 teams, and we're understanding what we're getting from that. I think the most important thing to us over the next probably year is engagement with our demographic. We're not in a position yet to have global distribution on products, only in certain areas such as Norway and Sweden, and the UK is starting up. I think probably in a year's time, we're going to be a lot more data-driven when it comes to Formula One and motorsports. But we do have an agenda over the coming months, as you all do as well, where we're launching a much more granular kind of campaigns directly with guys like Kimi and guys like Carlos, and we're trying to bring all that together, put all these guys in a kind of place where they're all really comfortable with us as a brand, and then we're going to start really trying to push from there upwards. But it has to be, we want it to be quite organic as a brand, because I think that's something that Husky, we tend to be quite organic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, and everybody kind of looks at that differently, and how they are putting together that data and making it make sense for them. So I think, one of the things a lot of our brand partners come to us and ask is, how do we fit some of this data into our models? Like you guys mentioned, and that's something that we really try to help. If you can't fit it into your model correctly, then if you don't have a number to plug in there, then sport would get discounted. So I think using data to really demonstrate the power of sport is a huge priority. So thanks for sharing about that, guys. I think the other thing that's kind of coming in, Ricardo, a few people have asked about the Olympics. So obviously this is a huge change and a huge pivot for you, and you guys have had such a long relationship with the games. How has this kind of changed your plans? I don't know if it's too early, but are you guys doing a completely different strategy than what you had planned for this year based on just the timing and the pivot?
No, in reality, we are not.
Okay.
Of course, we have when the games happen next year, we have to understand how the consumer sentiment has changed and how that can impact the execution of our work. But luckily, the work that we have done for this year, which of course everything was already finished, it's timeless and can be deployed next year. Okay. So we expect to make some minor adjusts, but hopefully most of the work could be able to be used as we have originally planned. For most people, you don't start thinking about the Olympic Games until a couple of months before. But if you work as a sponsor of the Olympic Games, you have to start your work 4 to 5 years before. So today we are concerned with the Winter Olympics in China in 2022, the FIFA World Cup in 2022 in Qatar, the Paris Olympics in 2024. So we work with a timeline which is slightly different from the consumer consumption of the sport.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So the other thing that has kind of come up with folks is thinking about, now that all the events have been paused, a lot of them are going to be pushed, and then they perhaps will all start up at a very similar time, right? So, okay, with all the expansive sponsorship portfolio that InBev has, like, how are you guys thinking through that? Is that gonna cause issues with you because everything might happen at once versus kind of the spread out planning time? And is that a challenge for you, or how are you guys thinking through that part?
Yeah, it is. Not too worried about it, because at the end of the day, there will be a reset, right? I mean, MLB is on hold, NBA, or MLB hasn't even started yet. NBA is on hold, Premier League, La Liga, they're all on hold. They're all trying to finish or start their seasons. Truth be told, we work with very, rigid marketing calendars, and something like La Liga, the Premier League, and this sounds maybe a little blunt, for us the season has finished. So even if La Liga starts playing again in June, or the Premier League, our programs, we have all other kind of programs scheduled for those dates that the Premier League, La Liga, or the NBA may start again. So we'll have to pivot there a little bit. We may have a little bit of waste because there's some overlap, or there's some other programs scheduled. So be it, it's a price to be paid. But we work with our partners to make sure that the fans get what they want, and we'll probably see more tactical executions when MLB starts again, or NBA starts again. Same with Premier League and La Liga. So it's a long story of telling you it's hard to plan because we don't know when they start. It will be different in different markets and different zones. We do all kinds of scenario plannings. And in some instances, it may be, a waste of the rest of the season. And in some instances, we'll just, maybe step up our activation, given the time and moment and market. So I don't think there's a clear answer to that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough one, right? It's not something you ever would have thought about planning for, but I think it'll be interesting to see how people can navigate through that. So Patrick, to you on question, like how do you foresee your sponsorships kind of pivoting from here now that so much has been digital in the past bit? Do you see more of your sponsorships kind of lending itself to that as a primary vehicle versus a secondary vehicle?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said that probably 99% of our partnerships already have a fairly large digital component anyway. Elko mentioned it earlier. In terms of scale, it's a great kind of tool and a digital tool for us to have included in all the partnerships we work with anyhow. I think going back to even La Liga in North America, we had 20 events scheduled across this season, which obviously we're not able to fulfill all 20 events. Events and activations are a key part of us as kind of our mission with the league. We want La Liga to touch every corner of the world. We want fans all around the world to feel close to our clubs, to our team, to our players, and the kind of product of La Liga. So there's no question the events and activations piece is always there, but digital is kind of shone through. But it was always there, and I think it's going to remain there. I don't know if there's any new kind of piece that's been groundbreaking for us over the last month or 2 months in terms of new digital tools or anything. It's very much digital's been there and it's going to be there, and I think it's just forcing us to continue to think outside the box. And maybe some of the partners that we originally had who were very focused on event and activation and experiential are now thinking of what are those custom kind of experiences that we can create digitally. And hey, maybe they'll lean towards that in the future, or maybe we'll see a better kind of blend. But it's digital is going to be there, and it is there.
Yeah, and so I think I totally agree with you. And when we're looking at how people are activating, digital is taking and social is taking such a forefront. I don't think it's going to change. It just may be a little heavily weighted, right? So I think maybe we'll pivot a little bit, guys, now and take a few questions from the panel or from the group here that's joining us. So one of the things that, there's been a lot of wild speculation about how much money is being lost in sport when things aren't happening. We've seen some early estimates of saying like there's about $62 billion of loss expected kind of globally, and then only about half of the events are expected to continue. One of the questions from the group here is, essentially thinking like, how are you guys renegotiating any of your contracts because of this? Have you, what have you done with the funds you had allocated to this to shift into? And how is this impacting kind of your budgets and the way you're thinking about 2020 and beyond? I don't know if anybody wants to jump in there, but Ricardo, this one was specifically addressed to you, so I think maybe.
Okay, I can. I'll be happy. I'll be happy not to talk about it. No, there of course there are a few things that we cannot disclose because of confidentiality. But I think that one thing which is very important is this is a time for the sports industry to help each other. So of course there's a lot of money on the table. But it really depends on how is your perspective, your approach to sports and to sponsorships. If you are in the sports world for the short term, you are going to be impacted a lot more the other companies that are here for the long term. So if you are a long-term investor, a long-term sponsor, when an event is postponed, you're going to get your value at some point in the near future. So the impact for you is not as great as if you have bought things for the next month and an event has been canceled. So there is not a single answer for that. But I think in general, the approach that we are trying to take is we've been part of this ecosystem of sports and entertainment for a very, very long time. So we are doing everything we can to help our partners to overcome the problems that we collectively have as an industry. And everybody has been very accommodating in how we exchange value, and value can be new assets. If you cannot deliver an event now, maybe you can deliver more content that was not part of your contract. So that's one thing that the right holders can do for us. At the same time, If there were payments that can be postponed, and we negotiate that. But I think in general, it's not one side trying to take advantage of the other, or just looking at yourself. You have to think more holistically about the industry and the role that you play as a funding partner for a lot of the things that happen in sports.
I think
that's a great way of looking at it.
Following on from Ricardo, we completely mirror that. I think we look at all sponsorships very much as a partnership, and it has to work both ways, in the good time and the bad. I think sports is very much one of those challenging things to sometimes partner with, because sometimes you have injuries, sometimes you have crashes, you have losses. It goes up and down anyway. But I think, especially with us, we're with our partners for the long term, and like all relationships, if you can make it through the challenging times, then it just makes that whole situation a lot stronger afterwards, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking about it. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that?
I think it touches on one of the first things I mentioned, which is that those long-term partnerships are key for us, and we're fortunate enough to have most of our partners in long-term relationships where we can continue to build, off the pandemic and find value, as Ricardo mentioned, and James.
Yeah, and we do have a follow-on question to that, which is, has, now that we've seen kind of a shift to, the athletes actually having quite a bit of impact in this time. So, I've been asked to throw out there to you guys, has anybody reallocated budget to athletes and ambassadors now that they're kind of the voice of this current stage, or are you continuing as is, just based on your planning?
I can jump in if you like.
Sure.
We've seen from partners, maybe there are ambassador meet and greets where there'll be an event or activation, but that's now becoming digital. So we have seen a pivot through some partners. And then we've also seen like ambassador challenges or player challenges and things like that are coming online. I think those are things that we've always thought about and done with, we've executed with some partners, and maybe it wasn't part of the picture for all partners, but definitely we've seen a kind of pivot to having, maybe it's a Zoom or WebEx or a webinar with ambassadors and maybe community members, or maybe it's looking at it from a sport project perspective and doing a digital coaching education program for some youth communities and grassroots. So whether it's ambassadors or players or kind of community initiatives, we've definitely seen a bit of a pivot from various partners, and it's worked quite well.
Yeah, well, I think to add to that, a couple of questions here revolved around what you guys think the best content that has been generated for each one of you guys independently during this time. Like, what's been your favorite, most impactful piece of content that's been out there? I don't know if Ricardo, do you want to start there? Or?
Yeah, so I've been following close the work that Elko's colleagues in Brazil have been doing. The Ambev has been doing a tremendous job in using digital for live broadcasting of events. It's been very popular, so they're very quick. And Ricardo, the head of marketing in Brazil, has been doing a great job in using this moment to pivot from all the work that Ambev has been doing to a more interactive and digital one. So Coca-Cola has been doing a lot of that too, but just not to speak exclusively about the Coca-Cola work, I'll call out to my friends at AB InBev.
Thank you, Ricardo. That answers answers the question from my end.
Okay. Fair enough. How about Patrick and you, James? Do you guys have some favorite pieces of content that has either you've produced or been a part of that you think's been really impactful?
Yeah, I think one that I've loved is the NBA. Our friends of the NBA doing a kind of virtual game of horse, which is really cool, with various players and ambassadors and former players. I mean, it's really cool. I think we should be seeing a La Liga Crossbar Challenge or something coming soon, hopefully. But I like the NBA horse one. It's very cool.
Yeah. James, how about you? Oh, I think we've lost your sound there.
There we go. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
There's two things we really enjoyed being part of over the last few weeks. One, we came up with a little bit of content in McLaren called the Box Hill Shoot, which was a little bit of a behind-the-scenes kind of unboxed kind of session with Carlos and Lando. Lots of running up hills and talking about sheep and getting a bit of an insight into those guys. And also we've been involved. We have a partner and a friend who is one of the astronauts at NASA, and we've been working on a little bit of content with him. And he's recently gone up to space. A guy called Chris Cassidy. So we were doing things like live streaming the launch and doing a few question and answers with him, which I think was really good. Especially the kids were really excited about that too. I think those are the two that stood out. We really enjoyed working with.
Definitely. I think there's been a ton of great things that have been. I think necessity is the mother of invention, right? So folks have done some terrific pivots and put content out that's really engaging. And so we're kind of getting to the end of our time here. So I wanted to make sure that I gave everybody a minute just to say a few words about, if they had any advice to folks going forward based on what you've seen so far in the pandemic, like what would be a couple of words of advice around sponsorship that you might want to share with the group, and then we'll kind of conclude and go from there. So Ricardo, how about you?
Okay, well, thank you again for the invitation to be part of it. Congratulations for the event. My last few words is just the way I've been looking at this crisis. I mean, everything is very negative now, and it's very easy to lose perspective of the industry that we work. So sports is an unbelievably resilient industry, and will come back much faster than a lot of other industries. So while the outlook of what's happening in the short term is very negative and is very concerning, and we cannot underestimate the impact of the crisis, you have to look beyond the crisis. And when this all gone in some shape or form, we will be back in a much stronger way than we were before because of the industry that we work on. So I'm very optimistic about the future, and we are just holding all the plans to be able to start again to have this conversation with the consumers and tell the stories that only the sports and entertainment allow us to do. So thank you.
Kim, I think if I may.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Kim, I'm going to quote Scott Galloway. I think it's at NYU or Columbia. I always forget which college university is. He said there's probably an overreaction on the short term and an underestimation and underreaction on the long term. And I think that's very true. We have to be careful. Certainly speaking for myself, we at AB InBev, we just want to immediately react to what's happened now. How can we address that? And we should to a certain extent. But it's the longer term impact and what that is that we may be underestimating a little bit collectively in our industry. And that's the one thing that I need to keep an eye on. Short term, maybe overreaction, long term underestimation. But in the end, I emphasize, I want to come back to how I started my introduction. I really think that a number of the fundamentals remain in place, which is sports as a passion point is not going to change. How we're going to consume that and how we're going to activate that is changing, will change, and would have been changing anyway. It's probably being accelerated because of this.
No, I think that's really insightful. Thank you. I agree with you. I think there's always going to be kind of a knee jerk when a crisis happens, but I think this will have long-term ripple effects, and we're seeing it in the data already, right? How things have shifted and changed. And, I think navigating through this, especially with brands, because, you have to, Ricardo, you mentioned you plan for this stuff so far in advance, right? You can either stay the course or, make some pretty drastic pivots. So, I think that's super insightful. Patrick, how about you? What do you want to leave a few parting thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guys hit it. I think sponsorship probably a decade ago looked different than what it does today, and it will continue to evolve and change. And I think we know that our sport lives beyond the kind of 90 minutes of the match. And I think for us, making sure that we kind of remain true to our values as a league, and we're kind of considering each step with all stakeholders, whether it's a brand partner, whether it's a broadcasting partner, whether it's the clubs. I think it's, I don't think our strategy is necessarily going to change. The games will resume. Obviously, public health and safety is going to always be kind of first and foremost and most important. But I think sponsorship will continue to evolve, and I think it'll be interesting to look back in a few years' time as to if this had a kind of major U-turn in the evolution of it. I mean, I guess it'll be hard to define, but I think it'll continue to, the games will continue, and I think we just have to be ready and have everyone in mind.
That's terrific. Thank you. And James, what's your take on the parting shot here?
Well, we kind of think, and I think sports are about people. Winning is about people, and I think COVID or no COVID will continue to inspire and support the guys we work with. And whilst we're all at home and staying at home, Admiral McCraven from the US Navy said, "Start the day by making your bed," and I think that's a good place to start at the moment too.
That's a good point. And listen, I did want to thank everybody for joining, and we at Hookit are trying to help brands navigate through this process with data, and are always willing to help out. And that's something we've been really focused on as a group, is making sure when people are making these pivots, near live real-time data kind of can help in a really big way. So excited to kind of think through this. And for us, parting shot is really, I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, which is, you can't manage what you can't measure. So we're excited to kind of continue this path with everybody throughout sport. And we appreciate the time and appreciate iSportConnect putting this together. And thanks everybody for tuning in. And I'll let Ben kind of sign off with everybody, but appreciate everybody's time. And for those of you that are tuning in from home, thanks for taking the time out of your day to spend a little time and think through this with us all.
Yes, thank you very much, Kim. Many thanks for that, and thank you to you for taking the time as well. Also, Ricardo, Patrick, James, and Ilko for being with us today. We had so many questions coming in across the chat, so I'm sorry that we weren't able to get through them all, because I think it would have taken us about 2 weeks, and the pandemic might have been over by then. But we'll be back with another event next week, which you can see on the screen now currently, which is going to be featuring Real Madrid and Formula One, which is available to sign up to now. So yes, once again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.